start recording.
All right, cool. Well, thank you to everyone who's on, and we'll go around and introduce ourselves in a minute, but I'm Roxann Smithers, and my co-host and co-founder of this Meetup group, Tiffany Wright. We want to just thank everybody for taking some time this evening for the Source Collective. As some of you know, if you've now joined the group and you've maybe participated in some of our other meetings, we are looking to create a roundtable group of business owners that can share ideas and really focus on growing and developing our businesses. Tiffany and I are both bringing unique perspectives. She's bringing a financial, CFO, cash flow, operations perspective, and then I bring the legal piece to that. And then we love to open it up to conversation and questions to learn from everybody. We want it to be a real give and take conversation. We chose the name Source because it's a Roman god of wealth, prosperity, and luck. And we do believe that in order to grow your business, you need to have a prosperity mindset, you need to have a wealth of information, and you need a little bit of luck. So we thought that was an apropos name for the group, and we're hoping it, will continue to grow. We will have PowerPoint slides that we will share after the presentation. It's sort of to the folks who RSVP'd, it's sort of the reward for RSVPing for the presentation. And we're hoping to get, dialogue going within the Meetup group. Before we get formally in, Tiffany's going to talk for a little bit. We'll take questions. I'll talk for a little bit, and then we'll open it up for discussion. I just wanted to say that, I'm pretty sure all of us have a lot of other very significant, very weighty things on our minds. We're already all home because of the pandemic. And then we are all either, watching, participating in, and experiencing everything that is going on in terms of the protests, in terms of just the civil unrest, the political action that is happening, not civil unrest, the political action that is happening. And we don't take it lightly. I think we all are trying to balance progressing and trying to balance our goals and trying to balance, at least for ourselves, representing ourselves as Black women in this country, and also wanting to meet our personal goals, our professional goals, our economic goals. And I think that part of our progress personally also moves things forward as a group. And we don't in any way take it lightly that where we are and where we're trying to go is the product of people who came before us who didn't have the luxuries and the opportunities that we have. So while we're going to talk about business and we're going to talk about how we can grow our businesses, it is not in a vacuum, and it's not without a full and complete awareness of where we all sit in this country and what it all means for us to be here and what it all means for the progress that we are trying to have for our businesses and what we want to do with that progress. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get into things that in the grand scheme of things might seem a little small right now, but are part of that bigger pie. So Tiffany.
I totally thank you very much, Roxann. I totally agree with you. I was thinking about, I read where someone was, I think it was Kaepernick, who was bailing some of the protesters out in Minneapolis. And obviously, if your business is successful, then that's one way that you could participate. I remember reading that the Herman Russell, that during I read his autobiography, and apparently I didn't know this, during the 60s, the 50s, and the 60s, he used his money to bail people out. That was his contribution. They said, no, Herman, we don't want you to actually participate in the demonstrations, in the protests. We want you to use your money to bail these people out and to give them jobs so that they could actually have money to be able to go out there and continually protest. So there are many things that business owners can do.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to have everybody, since we have a smaller group, do you want to give everybody a chance to kind of introduce themselves?
Yes. Okay. I think we've already gone, so let's just go in the order of which I can see. 470. There's no name there. Hello. Someone dialed in. Okay.
Hey, this is Robert Duhart.
Hello. You want to just introduce yourself a little? Your name. We said your name. Your business.
So I have an online clothing business called 90 Degrees South, and I sell outerwear, activewear.
Okay. Thank you for joining. Next up, Catherine Carlin.
Hi there. Yeah, I'm Catherine Carlin. I go by Katie. I'm a lawyer, and I have a business in California that's a co-working business with childcare. So, we work for grown-ups.
Thank you for joining us, Katie.
Thanks.
Robert Duhart.
I think he dialed in. He was on. That was just on the caller.
Okay. So it looks like we've had some drop off between those who are RSVP'd and those who showed up, but that's okay. Maybe they'll join us later, as sometimes happen even in person. We often have a few people come in about 15 minutes later. Okay. So I will kick this off. Today, or this evening, we're talking about accelerating your growth through M&A and partnerships. One way to quickly grow your business is to use M&A and partnerships, and lots of times that's a methodology that women and minorities don't fully take advantage of. It's a very rapid way to scale than to do so organically. Obviously, you can scale organically, but oftentimes if you want to grow quickly, this is the way to do it. So I will talk about the financial and perhaps a little bit of the strategic piece. And then, of course, Roxann will address the legal considerations. So first, mergers and acquisitions. The purpose of M&A is to expand the company reach. So that's geographical or divisions or whatever it may be. You may want new product lines, whatever, but to expand the company reach, to gain market share. So especially, and I'm thinking of larger businesses that combine, you might have, two of you may have, let's say T-Mobile and Verizon. Well, they combine and now they take up a larger portion of the market share. Expanding into new segments, you can build it organically, or you can buy, or you can merge with or acquire another entity that's already in the segments that you want to get into. And then one thing I'd like to point out is for those who are considering entrepreneurship, who are considering moving into a different area, like maybe they're pivoting right now. Acquisition is a way of becoming an entrepreneur. Instead of building it from scratch, you can buy it, and the barriers are typically a lot lower, because if you're going after a proven business, or you're buying a proven business, it's a whole lot easier to get the funding than it is for a startup. So I'm just going to provide a little bit more of clarity, and Roxann will give more from the legal perspective. But a merger, we always hear the term merger and acquisition. A merger is a combination of equals into one single entity. So company A, company B disappear and become company C. And so typically, outside of all the investment banks and so on you have to pay, typically, because it's a merger of equals, it's a combination of equals, there's no money that changes hands. It's typically just new stock issuance in equitable amounts. So one might be 55% of the combination, the other one might be 45%, it may not be exactly 50-50. But again, the new entity issues shares to the former companies in their amounts. So again, like I said, there's no need to come up with this huge funding source. Acquisitions are a different story. One entity is acquiring another, or a person, an individual, is acquiring another entity. And so in order to do that, typically the funding is like in a turnaround. And right now, it's a crisis. There's a lot of entities out there that may be truly suffering. And so they would be a candidate for an acquisition, but they would be considered a turnaround. And to fund a turnaround, if they're struggling, they may not actually have much value. And we've discussed value in some of our other conversations. But if they're struggling, then and they don't have much value, then you're not going to pay them for value that's not there. Instead, you're going to assume the debt of the entity. You're going to maybe do an earn-out agreement, which is, okay, you're not worth much now, but under my management, you will be worth more, and so I'll pay you XYZ over the next 3 years if that does happen. Or you can do seller financing, a multi-year payout to the seller for some agreed upon value of the company. So then if the company is moderately healthy, then you can do any of those, you can use any of the financing options that I just gave you. But you can also do an equity buy down. That's where the owner, and these are options where you don't need as much money up front. Because you're trying to take advantage of the opportunities now, and you're in a cash constrained environment, right? So there's liquidity. I mean, the larger companies have gone out to the market and tried to issue bonds and so on in order to hoard as much cash as possible. But the options for smaller businesses are just not the same. So all of these things I'm saying, I'm giving these to you, thinking that it may be a little bit more difficult to get the typical bank financing. And also the more difficulty the entity that you're having, the more difficulty the entity that you're considering buying is having, the more difficult it would be to get traditional financing. So anyways, am I confusing anyone? No, you're good. Okay, so moderate health, same as above, equity buy down, supplier or vendor financing. This is something that a lot of people don't consider. If you have a supplier who's in great health and you can convince them that you're going to do a lot of business with them, or that it's somehow in their best interest to work with you, that you're strategic to them, then you may be able to get financing from them that's 1 year or even 2 years long, instead of the typical 30-day financing. And that's an option that a lot of people overlook, but it's there. And then yet another one would be prepaid sales, depending on what type of company you're looking at acquiring. So for companies that are strong, if you're looking at acquiring a company that's actually in really good financial health, then you can use any of the ones that I mentioned. Those still apply, but you can also use the traditional bank sources and so on. You can use mezzanine financing. That's another term for that is bridge financing. And you can use private equity. And through acquisitions, you could grow. I knew one company that had a little bit under 5 million in revenue, and they acquired a company that had 45 million in revenue. So you don't have to be the bigger company. You can be the smaller company, but typically it is the larger company that does the acquisition. But it doesn't matter, because you're really basing you're basing your financing and so on what you're acquiring, not on yourself. It's not like a startup. It's not based on you and your personal picture. Okay, so now let's switch to partnerships. Partnerships are another way to grow, and it doesn't typically require this kind of financing. It's not, you don't have to, it's much more about relationships when it comes to a partnership. Because obviously with a merger, it is about the relationship, but oftentimes, the people at the top can't have two CEOs. They might try that for a bit, but someone tends to go away. But an acquisition, typically, whoever you're acquiring, that leadership team goes away after anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. But let me tell you, typically, although you want to lock them up for 3 years, typically it's hard for business owners to take a back seat. And so usually they only last for about 6 months, but you just want them around to be able to pick their brains as much as possible, because again, what you're trying to do is scale rapidly, and the former ownership is a huge source of information to help you be able to navigate that growth. Okay, so partnerships, I divided this into 2 different groups. Partner to extend your reach and conserve cash. And with that, I place co-marketing and marketing partnerships in that group. One-off partnerships, which I call sponsorships, but it would be not just one entity that's sponsoring you for a particular event or meeting, but someone that sponsors you on an ongoing basis. Or over the course of a year, they sponsor you 5 or 6 times or whatever, but they are actively engaged and actively working with you on the marketing side. And then co-branding is another form of partnership. That's more of a interwoven agreement, either if you're going to co-brand totally, or you could just be co-branding a piece. Like for instance, an IT services company locking up with a software provider to help that, in order for the IT services company to look like it has a broader scale or a broader offering for its customers, a suite of offerings, let's say, that would be co-branding. So they brand this particular component. Then there's partnering for growth in capital. And that's joint ventures. That's 2 complementary entities are sharing resources, or they're working together on a project or projects. There's the mentor-mentee partnership. That can be a JV or that can be a partnership, but that's what I define as a mentor is providing funding, guidance, and introductions. So the whole point of this mentor relationship is to help the smaller company grow, which would be your company grow, but then the mentee is providing something like a portion of a contract, because let's say if you got a $10 million contract, but you're a $2 million firm, you can't ramp up to $10 million that first year. You have to do it in, you have to chunk it down. So the first year you could maybe double in size to 4 million. So you're able to handle 2 million of that $10 million contract, but your partner gets the other 8 million. So that would be a fair exchange. They're going to give you all kinds of information, guidance, help you grow and so on, help fund you so you get that contract, and you give them a piece of that contract as you ramp up. Strategic partnerships, often these are large or well-funded corporations. Well, the one side of the relationship is a larger, well-funded corporation, and they provide capital or entree into a particular market, whereas the small business is going to provide maybe speed to market for a particular product, technology, or they may also provide market entree. Sometimes it's easier for large companies to buy or to strategically partner. Well, sometimes they don't want to commit to buying a company. They want to see where it goes, but they don't want to spend the money in-house to develop the technology or to pursue a particular market. But they see an entity out there that is actually pursuing it, and it's much cheaper for them to invest in them or to partner with them than it is for that large company to do it in-house. So that's where the opportunity is there. The key strategic considerations are to make sure that you lock down your goals. You need to lock down your goals before you do anything, because otherwise you could jump all over the place. Be very clear. What's your ultimate objectives? What is your time frame? If the faster your time frame, that really, if your time frame is to do this in the next year or 2 years, obviously organic growth may not be the way to go. It could be, but it may be acquisitions, or perhaps there's a very good strategic partnership candidate right there. And then what resources do you currently have to achieve those goals? That will help you decide which methodology might work best for you. And then once you decide on a strategy, before you fully commit, really think about and understand why you chose that strategy. What other options are there for what you want to accomplish? Why this strategy and why not another? What resources do you need to execute on that strategy? What resources do you have? And then finally, optimization is critical. You want to make sure you set clear goals. I know I keep mentioning goals. It's really, really important. And I have to tell you, there's so many business owners I run into who don't have clear goals. And that's why I think every time we get into these meetings, I talk about goals. And then create a plan and identify your targets. That could be interchangeable in terms of, depending on where you're starting. If you're trying to decide if you want to partner or acquire, you may want to start with identifying targets before you actually do a full fleshed out plan. But make sure you have a framework of a plan at the same time that you're identifying targets, at least, so you know what kind of path, so you can at least chart your path. And then whichever option you decide, you're going to have to manage the relationships either until the deal is completed, or if it's a partnership, it's ongoing. And so obviously in terms of managing the relationships, that's where Roxann would really talk to you about the legal side of doing that.
Was that my cue or no?
I had to mute mine, so then I don't know. I'll mute mine now.
Okay, I was like, is that my cue? Okay, so any initial questions in terms of kind of the financial side of it?
Oh yes, I didn't ask about that. Any questions? Okay.
Wait, sorry. I have a question. When you talked about this, the merger, combining equals into one single entity, and typically no money changes hands, just new stock issuance in equitable amounts. I was I was wondering about how complicated that process is, and actually maybe that's a question for Roxann, because it sounds like it could just be done really easily, but I guess it probably can't.
And Roxann will go into more detail, but yes, it can be very complicated, depending on the size of the organizations and what kind of, especially since it's stock, you know, what kind of liabilities are you taking on, or not taking on in this combined entity? What kinds of things would, in that case, if you're concerned about liabilities, you may want to spin off some of those entities, or sell some of those assets that have liabilities attached to them that you don't want. But yes, Roxann can talk more